Hello and welcome, everyone. We are thrilled to have you join us in a unique and enlightening webinar experience. Cocktails and Cash Flow. Sip your way to your dream home and financial freedom. Prepare your favorite drinks and settle in as we blend a zest of cocktail crafting with wisdom and wealth building. Whether you're looking to lay the foundation for your first home or aiming to solidify your financial freedom, this webinar is a step by step guide to improving your financial knowledge and skills. Today's financial experts who will be specializing in wealth strategies are no other than my main man, Chris, who is not only a lender to me, but is also one of my greatest friends. With years of experience in the mortgage industry, we also bring in another financial whiz, Brian, a man with profound financial expertise who is a maestro in the art of money management. Brian's knowledge is not just like theoretical, it's built on years of real world experience and success. The wisdom he is about to share comes from deep within the vaults of financial knowledge. So get ready for a session that promises you to be both entertaining and educational as we reveal the secrets to unlocking your financial freedom. Let's raise a glass and toast to your future to financial freedom. And let's do it right, people. So I'm gonna bring on Chris. Let's jump on. What's going on, Chris? How are you?
Cheers! I'm doing great, man, and I appreciate the strong introduction. I actually was fortunate enough to bring the special guest this time. The gentleman that you alluded to, Brian, somebody that I've known pretty darn well for a little while. He just so happens to be my father-in-law. Coming from my background of taking classes in finance, but not really having a lot of real world practical application for strategies and wealth building, this is somebody that I've leveraged incredibly hard to have a better grasp myself of, my personal finances, the best place to be utilizing those funds, to grow wealth for me, my family. And, he's somebody that I've relied on a ton. So I'm glad he had a chance to join us today. And since we're in the same room, I got an easy, quick intro. There we go. So I appreciate him joining. I'm going to let him give you a little bit of his background. You did a nice job of an intro, but he can talk a little bit about his background, and then we're going to get into some planning and strategizing.
First, Isaiah, I want to thank you for this opportunity. I always love talking to people and trying to help people whenever I can. And thank you, Chris, as well. My experience is I went to school to be an accountant and loved numbers and playing around with numbers. And that led to eventually me getting into the financial services field. And I started off by doing seminars all across the country for people in every walks of life, for just common folks like you and I to executives at boards, and finding out really what works, what doesn't work, and how to set a foundation, when to start. And the one thing I realized in doing it is it's never too late to start. So for a lot of you who think that finances is overwhelming or it's too complicated, I'm going to tell you just the opposite. The simpler you keep it, the better off you are. And if you make small, good choices throughout your life, you're going to end up very successful and have all the things that you really want in your life. So we'll separate a little bit as we go through the difference between wants and needs, because I found, what people confuse those two words quite a bit. And so my goal today is to get you to first base. This is not going to be investments 400 or anything too deep. It's just get you started, build a foundation, and where to start. So that's our goal for today.
Okay, perfect. Sounds good. So, Chris, do you got anything else to before we jump into our whole spiel and getting ready to jump into this whole video? Do you have anything else to say before we jump into it?
I mean, for me, I just think Brian hit the nail on the head. I think people feel generally like it's a huge task. I think people feel like understanding how much money they have left over at the end of every month is hard. And when they do figure that out and they have a little bit of money, they're not really sure what to do with it. But to Brian's point, it's about small, consistent, good choices and just being methodical with your choices consistently every week, every 2 weeks, every month, and doing those things repeatedly. And we're going to get into that a little bit, further in the conversation. But we'll show you a great example of how just the smallest change in life can end up leading to a much bigger picture win down the road when you decide to retire. And it really illustrates how little decisions add up to big wins.
100%. So, Brian, I would say I don't know if you want to jump right into it, but I know you talk about a lot, your baseball analogy. I mean, I know we talked about it a lot and through our many phone conversations and actual phone calls. And you said something about like this thing called Jack and Jill that people should be starting on. I feel like it's a good thing to start on.
Yeah, Isaiah, if you, I don't know if you have a chart you could pull up and we could talk about Jack and Jill, but the baseball analogy is pretty straightforward. It's that, you know, a lot happens before you get to first base, right? I mean, you got to go through, you know, getting, you know, a bat, taking some batting practice, you know, fielding, making the team. You know, you don't just go down to first base. So all the little things about, you know, learning how to hit or, you know, how to watch pitches, there's all the little background stuff that goes on before you make that hit or you get to first base. And it starts to me with setting goals, right? So for even a baseball player, somebody at a young age has to set a goal that I want to play baseball, right? And then they go through all the steps that get them there, and maybe it's mom and dad helping them out. And the same is true with our finances. So let's talk about Jack and Jill. And this is the
do we have a pause?
Jill is a young couple. Well, first it's just a young gal. Her name is Jill. And starting out, Jill starts saving money, and she starts putting away $1,000 a year. And she does that for 10 years. And then at age 30, she stops saving money, and it just continues to compound. And if you look at the middle of the page and go down to the bottom, she'll have put away, if she does that for just 9 years, from 20 to 29 years old, 10 years, she put away $1,800 a year. And I'll tell you where I got that number, Isaiah. I see people go to Starbucks and buy coffee. And I'll just say that Starbucks is $5 a day. Well, if you do that for 365 days, that's about $1,800. So when people say they can't save money, and I say it's small choices, there's a small choice. I give up that $5 a day, or I make a goal to save $5 a day. I work hard for my money. I want to get my money working hard for me. And if she did that for 10 years, she put away $18,000. And when you get to the bottom of that column, by the time she's 65 years old, she ends up with $663,000. And that was just saving for 10 years. Then there's Jack. Jack's the party boy. Jack's out having fun. He's going to the ball games. He's hitting the clubs, and he doesn't decide to save any money until he's 30 years old.
I know a couple.
I've met a lot, and I've been Jack myself. So if he starts at age 30 and he saves all the way through age 65, he puts away $63,000, and he only ends up with $463,000. So you see that Jill has got her money working for her. Jack's still working for his money. Now, I know we're not all 30 years old. And I know that, you know, $1,800, some people can maybe save more, some are, you know, a little bit less. But if that person consistently saved from a young age, if Jack married Jill and they continued to save for all those years, they would have put away $82,000 and ended up with $1.1 million, all because they decided not to have a $5 Starbucks.
So it is possible for the average person to become a millionaire, technically, is what you're telling me.
It's doing the small things. It's doing small things. And I think the tie into that, and I'll ask both of you guys, because you've both been, you know, very successful in your careers. Isaiah, you set goals for yourself?
Yes. I mean, of course I set goals. I mean, I have been doing real estate for 7+ years now. And every December, what me and my wife do is we sit down, we go over our financial goals, and we do a vision board, and we also do a goal sheet, like in a mission statement. I mean, like, it sounds like kind of crazy to do that as like just a couple, but we do it for our relationship, and we also do it for our business to set, like, you know, if we want to go on a vacation or things like that, we plan it ahead. We don't just do things willy-nilly and just say, hey, we're just going to do it. I know it's not possible to do so. So we set goals in December, and that'll be our long-term goal for like the remainder of the year. And then every month, like, I don't want to do it, she doesn't want to do it, but we make time to do it. We set down like at least an hour. I say an hour, just give us an hour. And we set down an hour just to like go over, like, hey, are we meeting our goals? Can we chill? Can we take a week off? Like, how hard do we have to move and groove to get to our financial dream of this year and make sure we hit all like our strides? What about you, Chris?
Yeah, 100%. So for me, I always think in the grand scheme of a year, I think of all the big things that I want to accomplish throughout the year. And like at the end of every month, where I need to be to accomplish those goals. And I set up streams for where money needs to be. You know, does it go to rainy day? Does it go to 401k? Does it go, you know, where are things going? So that way I can take the hard work that I put in, the income that I earn, and I can make sure that I'm driving it to the right places so that it can accomplish my goals. So to Brian's point as well earlier, it's not that hard. You have to put in the work, the effort up front, plan ahead for a year, set up the streams of where you want your money to go, understand that those will get you to your goal. And then you just got to understand the work every month that you have to do to put that in. And as long as you hit that monthly earning goal, the money is going to go to the right places to help you accomplish the things that you want to accomplish. So for me, planning is huge. It allows me to set up some framework so that way the work drives the goal, the money or whatever that is, and then things can go to their directed place on its own. And it doesn't require thought throughout the year. It's just going.
I think you both said something very important. You know, Isaiah, you said you set aside an hour a month. That goes back to my point. It doesn't have to be complicated, does it?
No,
right?
It doesn't.
You just have to have some kind of a plan.
And that really is the biggest thing for us, is just basically setting up step one, a budget, and which brings us to our next part, is just going through the natural steps of what it is to be financially. It's a long journey, but which brings me to our next part, is just going over step one. And that brings me to Brian. Like, what do you think step one would be the biggest thing for us to like go into achieve?
Yeah. When I graduated with my accounting degree, I went to my mom and dad and I said, you guys got to learn about cash flow. Cash flow is so important. And my mom, she goes, well, come on over and show us. So I started going through it. She goes, that looks like a budget. And, mom was old school. Mom used to have envelopes. When dad got paid, she put money in each envelope, so because he got paid weekly. And some of it was for food. She had all of her envelopes. So I learned budgeting at a young age from mom. And I always loved the months where there were 5 Fridays, because dad got paid every Friday, because she counted on 4 weeks for a month. And when we got that 4 times a year, we got that extra Friday. It was ice cream and candy and the good stuff. Yeah. But it started with her budgeting, my cash flow, whatever you want to call it. The first thing you have to do, and I say, when we were talking the other day, you said it great. You go, this time of year, everybody's doing their taxes. Mm-hmm. They get their W-2 and you go, I made that much money.
Where did it go?
Where did all this money go? Yeah. And you look at, the federal government gets paid first, the state, you get these FICA and Medicare taxes coming out of there, maybe insurance, so you have all these different deductions. Then you get your money back. And if you're like most people, you got to make sure you pay for groceries. And once I pay all my bills, I'm going to start saving some money. Well, once you pay all your bills, there's not a whole lot of money to save. So you have to make it a goal to pay yourself first, right? So we make sure everybody else gets our money but us. So the best way to do that is just simply create a budget. Now, you can do this very formal, and you can put it in Excel, like probably you two guys would do, or you can do something very simple. Just get a piece of paper and write down your expenses. And a lot of them are easy. Your rent, your mortgage, daycare, car insurance, car payments. Those are all, the easy ones to put down. But also you got to look at the small things. Where are you spending your money? And I would tell people, get one of these little notebooks, and just at the end of the day, write down where you spent your money. So if you went out for lunch, how much did you spend for lunch? And then you put down a tip. And, I started, adding up stuff like that when I was younger. And I go, it's costing me a lot of money over the course of a month to eat out. So I said, you know what? I'm going to limit it to once a week eating out, and I'm going to bring my own lunch. Now, again, it sounds old school, but my wife and I had a baby, Chris's wife, as a matter of fact, way back in the day, and we wanted to buy a house. And so our goal was, look, if we want to buy a house, and back then they were a heck of a lot cheaper than they are today. And the one thing I will tell people, you don't have to have a mansion to start with. And you guys probably, see people always want more. Get that starter house so you can start developing equity. We'll talk about, investing and developing equity in more detail down the road. But if you get into a home, you start developing equity. Well, how do I get in the home? I've got to set a budget. How much do I want? What house am I looking at? How much is it going to cost? What's my down payment? Right. How much do I have to set aside to meet that down payment? So let's say I determine I need $12,000 for a down payment, just, for whatever that number might be, or let's use an easier number. Let's say $6,000. So $6,000, I said, I want to move, get that in the next year. I have to put away $500 a month. So as I go, how do I know whether I can do that or not? I go look through my budget and say, what can I afford? What I can't afford? And you'll see people have, the people tell me they couldn't save any money. I'd say, okay, let's sit down. We start filling out a budget worksheet. And I go, you've got, cable, you've got HBO, Cinemax, Showtime, you've got ESPN Plus, you've got Disney Plus, Prime Video, and, they're paying for Prime to have stuff delivered to their door. I said, start adding all that stuff up. And they start adding it up, and I go, that's a lot of money every month. Almost as much as you add up all those incidental stuff. Now, I don't want people to go without having some enjoyment in their life. That's not my point to this at all. But there's opportunity costs. If we're spending that money on Netflix, that $22 a month, I don't have that money to put towards my down payment on my house. Now, if I have additional funds, as Chris said, he sets a strict budget and you've got $500 extra per month. I'll give you a better example. Let's say you sit down, you do your budget, and you've got an extra $700 per month. Well, it doesn't mean you only save $500. You can save more. But the key is sit down, go through everything. And, you start looking at it and, some things that I've talked to people about where, ladies like to take care of themselves and do different things, get their hair done or nails done, whatever. And I said, okay, you're doing it every 2 weeks. What if you push that back to every 3 weeks? I get a little, crusty by then on my nails, but you know what? I can do that because I want a house. So you start making those trade-offs of whether it's, putting money away for a house or whether you want to start investing like Jill so you have money for your retirement so you don't have to work your whole life.
Yeah, I think when you talk about a budget, the biggest thing that people don't do is they go off the top of their head. They don't sit down and write down every day what they're spending, or what I would call the low-lying fruit. The easy thing to do is pull out your credit card statements and pull out your bank statements and look at literally what was swiped, because most people don't use cash very much anymore. And so if you don't use a lot of cash, it's very, very easy for you to look at your credit card statement and look at your bank statement, maybe use 2 or 3 months of those statements to get a good average. And a lot of these bank accounts now will categorize your stuff for you. This is what you spend on groceries. This is what you spend on utilities, so it's very easy for you to sit down and use those tools and understand where you're spending money. And oddly enough, when people actually do that for the first time, if they do that and they calculate all their numbers and they figure out what they made, what the government took, what they walked home with on average, and then what their expenses are. Unfortunately, a mass majority of the country does that. And then they end up finding out, how am I can't live. I'm in the red. I'm spending more than I made this month.
Yeah.
And that's and that's first and foremost, that's why a lot of people end up with the rolling over credit card debt. But when they do this exercise, or when you do this exercise, you realize, oh my God, this is why I'm having such a hard time not having a balance on my credit card every month. Or, wow, this is why my savings account isn't going up as much as I'd like it to every month, even though I plan on it. When you sit down and look at the numbers, like Brian said, I guarantee you're going to look at it and go, man, I mean, just $20 here, $5 here, $10 here. Brian's talking about $5 a day can be
millionaire,
$1.1 million. And people are having a tough time on figuring out where to save. But I promise you, if you go through your bank statements and your credit card statements and you do a real budget and you include everything, you will find easily $5 a day, if not more.
Oh, yeah.
And you will find the pathway to buy your first home, which, if you're renting, rent over time is going to go up. It's going to continue to increase. But if you buy a house today, you lock in the cost of that home, your taxes and insurance, and some things will change a little bit over time, but not that much. So you basically lock in your expense of owning a house and putting a roof over your head. And as the expense of rent and other things go up over time, so does the value of your home. So you're building wealth by buying a home, and you're locking in the expense of having a roof over your head.
100%.
Budget.
Which I know it's time for questions, and I wanted to get this question. So somebody just commented, basically, they have an Acorns account, and a lot of people are having trouble budgeting and saving money. Do you think an Acorns account will be the best thing for them to start with, or do you think is it an easier way to start?
I think it's a good concept. Anytime you can, take, like I said, small things, you round up your bill or you add an extra $5. I think stuff like that, especially if you're, working to save money for a child, right? Then, I started off with the kids. I said I was going to put away $10 a week. Well, once you get to 3 kids, and again, money was a lot different back in the day, it can get expensive. But if you just, I throw my change in a jar every month, and that's $30, right? Yeah. So I'm talking about, somebody setting aside a little bits of money. Well, there's $30. So the Acorn account, something like that. Isaiah, if that's what it takes to help you save, normally I'm not pro people getting huge tax returns, but for some people, by having that money taken out every week in their check and giving it to the federal government and getting a refund at the end of the year, it's a forced savings, right? That little bit each week doesn't hurt. And all of a sudden at the end of the year, they get back 1,500 or $3,000. Some people, a buddy of mine used to get back $6,000 every year. And he goes, well, that's my vacation fund. I said, well, I'll tell you what, you're lending it to the government interest free. I said, give it to me. I'll invest it at the end of the year and I'll keep the interest. And he goes, I wouldn't do that. I go, I'm a nice guy and you wouldn't do that for me, but you'll do it to the federal government to lend them money tax free or interest free.
Yeah, I think that, and we talked about this too, everybody's rainy day fund is a little bit different. You know, Brian mentioned when you're young and you don't have a lot of expenses and it's kind of just you, it's easier to get to 3 months and be very comfortable there. The more kids you have, the more life circumstances that come up, you know, months of your bills. You don't ever need more than a year worth of bills set aside. But there are other goals like that as you get older and you move along in life and your financial picture changes. You know, that 3-month cushion may not be the right cushion to have anymore. That's something you can evaluate. But to Brian's point, if you don't have a cushion, 3 months is a great place to start. And once you get to the 3 months, now you can start to accomplish some of the other goals, like paying off the credit card, start to put money into, you know, a savings account to start getting ready to buy a house, things like that.
Or a 401k that we'll talk about in a minute.
Yeah. And the other thing too is, you know, when you create a budget, you'd never realize how much money you're losing or how much extra money you have to do those things until you budget. And if you realize, unfortunately, the money that's coming in isn't enough to accomplish your goals and you've trimmed everything out, you can find other ways to create revenue in your household. I mean, there's other ways you can do things. And so it all starts with understanding where your money and your cash flow is. And then you can make decisions that will benefit you and your family. The one big goal where we're at in this point of the conversation is a 3-month reserve.
Yeah. And I'm retired now. So, you know, my reserve is 12 months. So I've got money in the stock market and I don't want, you know, hey, I can't do this because the stock market's down. I know I can go a year with, you know, with no money coming in whatsoever. And I still get Social Security coming in and some interest payments here and there. So, you know, as you get older, you want a bigger one. If you have children, you need a little bit bigger safety net. At times you'll see nowadays, you know, a lot of these plans for healthcare have high deductibles to them. Well, you know, you listen to how some people get in financial trouble and it's healthcare concerns. And I feel bad for those people that, you know, we don't have a better healthcare system in this country. And then you see these deductibles of $5 or $7 grand. I don't care how much money you have. That'll set anybody back. Yeah. So there's something they can do at work for that. It's called an HSA, a health savings account. And here's a great spot to
say that again, just so we can.
HSA, health savings account. And when they put money in out of their paycheck, that money goes in, they don't pay any federal taxes on it, no state taxes, no FICA, and no Medicare. It's a great little savings to pay for medical expenses down the road. And as you build it up over time, you know, hopefully you never use it. And then when you get to 65, or like I did for retirement, you can use it to pay for all your prescriptions and co-pays and things of that nature. So it comes in really handy down the road. And if you ever need the money, it comes out totally tax-free if you use it for healthcare. And it's not like a health.
So that's like a home warranty for your house.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. A health spending account is different. That one, if you don't use the money by the end of the year, you lose it. That is not true in HSA. So, and one of the things we talked about, you know, just informally, you know, and I just want to touch on it now because it's in my mind. I don't want to forget it. Is people worry about saving money in their 401k because they think, I don't want to give the company my money. The company doesn't get your money. It goes into a trust and the company has no way to touch it in any way, shape, or form. So it's your money, it's protected by law, and it's another place you can have money deducted right from your paycheck, $5, $10, 10%, 5%, which I think is a great way to start accumulating money once you get past that rainy day fund, you know, and you get other things. And if you do need money, you know, you can borrow from it. You know, I always get stuck on whether you should borrow from it or not. And I say, well, it depends on what it's for. If it's to pay off an 18% credit card, maybe. You know, if it's to buy a home, maybe, right? I'd rather have you in a home than paying rent, you know, and develop equity. So a 401k is a great place for people to start. So I would say that's our journey getting towards first base is, go ahead.
Sorry, Brian, to cut you off, but a lot of people don't know that they can use their 401k to actually purchase a home.
Right. Yeah. For first-time home buyers, there are some nice provisions built into the law that allow them to access those funds. So I think it's, you know, again, I know you're in the business, but I think you got to, starting with owning a home is really equity. And rather than trusting somebody else, like the stock market, I got to trust on a company and their earnings. And, you know, if they make the right decisions, I mean, you know, unfortunately, you look at Budweiser and they put out a commercial and people boycott Bud and their stock falls like a rock. Well, that's tough. If you buy a home and you're putting your own investment in it, your time or money, I mean, you control that. I mean, so I mean, I love home ownership is one of the ways to help start, to develop, equity, and equity is ownership, or it's the third tier of investing. And we'll talk about that in a little bit more. So
the first thing we were going to talk about before
Chris, I got a question for you, buddy.
Yeah.
Real quick. So I've been hearing like a lot of my buyers, they've been coming along and saying, hey, I'm thinking about purchasing a multifamily and going into the multifamily route. And do you think that's a good idea for some people to want to save money? I mean, it's kind of a question for everybody, but do you think that's a good idea for people who want to save money or are thinking about saving money long term? Because how long do you have to live in a multifamily before you can buy your next home?
Listen, it's as long as you can be in a position where you have the money to support getting it up and running and owning multiple units, number one. And number two, you're okay with living in a community home, right? There's more like an apartment or a condo, right? If you're in a situation in life, this really strikes true with a lot of younger people who are early in their life. They don't have a bunch of kids you have flexibility. If you're going to buy a home and you are willing to be flexible and not have it be just your home, the more doors you have in a property, the better. So what we've always said if you have 4 units, if you buy a 4-unit house, the first 2 units should pay the mortgage. The third unit should be able to pay for the upkeep, and the fourth unit should be profit. And in most markets, that works pretty darn well, probably 95% of the time. The markets will vary, but most of the time, that's kind of how it works out. So if you can buy a home where you live in one of the units and you're okay with living in a multi-unit, you can have the other 3 units basically paying to maintain the property. And that's a way to allow you to continue to be able to save your money versus spending it on a house. You will have to get some elbow grease and you will have to take care of the home and you will be a landlord. But if you are willing to sign up for that because you have a long-term goal of investing in real estate, or you just want to create a better amount of affordability for yourself, and that's a route that you can take, that's a great way to go. And there's actually a couple different types of loans that have had changes recently where you can buy a 4-unit property if you're going to live in it with as little as 3.5% to 5% down. So, it's 100%. It's something you should look at. And we were talking about creating a rainy day savings and places to put your money. That's just another form of investment. It's another way of investing. And it's also a way that if you do it right, you can greatly reduce your expense of living. The roof over your head now is paid for.
So I say, when you talk about multifamily, I mean, I go back to when my parents were young. They were living with my grandparents for the first year they were married, with the idea that that's back in the day. That's how they did it, to save up so that they could get a down payment for a house, right? And I'm sure they got on each other's nerves from time to time. That's that nature. But that was back in the day. And I look at with a few of the clients I have with 2 different stories. One, in a lot of countries, it's very common for families to live together to cut expenses. And we had several situations where we had people who they worked for 40 years and they wanted to retire and they didn't save quite enough money, right, for whatever reason. And the daughter and son wanted to buy a house and they couldn't quite afford it. But collectively, when they got together, they could buy a bigger house that was then, what I liked about it, it was usually in a much better school district for the kids when they would do that. Granted, the property tax would be a little bit higher, but the parents then could enjoy their retirement. They had their daughter or son there to kind of keep an eye on them and make sure they weren't in, health-wise, they weren't in any trouble. And it helped out financially a tremendous amount. So again, do you think it's easy? To me, I think that would be kind of hard, but if that's what works, so there's a different variation of your multifamily, but it's intrafamily. And we've watched situations like that, or on the other side where parents have money to invest. And you and I talked about it a little bit on the phone, called the Daddy May, where, daddy actually lends the money, he buys the house and the kids rent with an option to buy, so, and there's all kinds of, it's too long to get into in this particular segment, but it's another way for the dad to make a real estate investment. He's got the house is secure. He's got a decent tenant, I would hope. So, except maybe the son-in-law, he might not like him so much, but that's always the case.
But you heard it here, folks. I'm not trying. You just heard Brian say that he's coming back because he said the Daddy May is a little too long to get into. So he's going to talk about that in another video. He doesn't know it yet, but he already volunteered.
Okay, good. Yeah. Well, we could have a bunch of these because I'd really like to get into the meat of investing and rather than just the simple stuff. So The first step is, and I normally advise people, for the safety net, or if they're saving for a down payment, put the money not in their same bank. So let's say I do business at ABC Credit Union. I'm going to tell them to go to XYZ Bank and put that rainy day fund. Don't put it with your regular banking. It's too easy to touch. And when you mentioned the Acorn, I like this. I don't care. Merrill Lynch or one of the brokerage firms, Morgan Stanley, and everybody has a money market fund. Credit unions have them. So they're a great place to put money, get a decent rate of return on it. So I would say that's first base. You want to try and save up that money and get into first base, and you want to keep that money safe, short-term liquid.
Yeah, that's where the rainy day fund has to go. So you can't touch it right away. It's harder to get a hold of. It's less convenient. The more inconvenient something is, the better it is, because it's still accessible if you really need it, but the likelihood of you going out of your way to go get it is a lot more slim, you know?
Yeah, I just thought I probably should say, what does liquid mean? Liquid means you can convert it to cash very quickly with no loss of principal, or very little loss of principal. And unlike, the stock market, is the stock market liquid? Yeah, I can cash in my account any day, but I don't know whether it's going to be up or down. So the reason I say this money fund, again, you like it because it saves short-term liquid. If I'm saving money up for a house, you find me the perfect house, I say, and then all of a sudden I go, yeah, there's only one problem. The stock market's down. I can't buy that house we've been looking for a year because the stock market's down. I don't want that. I want it where it's safe. And short term is, savings. And we can talk about all the other types of investments that fit under there. There's things like CDs, certificates of deposit, or people talk about treasury bills, which is loaning money to the federal government for 13 weeks, 26 weeks.
So this falls in kind of our step 4, which is maximizing our dollars and putting them into different accounts and money market accounts and things like that to kind of move forward with what we did save to kind of build on it. And is that correct?
That's absolutely. So now we get into like we talked about, putting money in your 401k at work. And, typically the young person says, where do I invest it?
And I said, before you get into that, which brings us up to our next comment, somebody just stated, I only have 8 more years till they retire. And they want to know, where do they start to save money until then? And which brings us to retirement. Where do we start? Where do I start?
This is a great segue. And like Brian said, there's no time that's too late to get in the game. And so one of the questions we always ask folks when we start talking about this, and I used to do, I ran a banking team for a long time, and I run a team now. And what I've done regularly every quarter is sit down and talk with folks about investing and why getting in early is so important, and getting in now, today, and not waiting until tomorrow is so important, is because you have these questions that run through your mind. If somebody were able to let you keep more of your money and invest it, and then just take the taxes out later, don't you think that would be a good idea? Of course it would. Generally speaking, most people pay probably in the 22% income tax bracket. A lot of families do. So regardless of what tax bracket you're in, when you get paid, if you get paid $1,000, most people only get to take home somewhere around high 600s to low 700s, depending on
700 is a good
30%. Yeah, because most people lose 22% to the government, feds. Then you have state tax, then you have Medicare, and then FICA. So you lose 30% of your money. The good news is there's a way to not only get to keep most of that 30% that you lose. You still have to pay you get to keep the 22% that the government's taking by putting the money in your 401k. They tax you later when you take it out, but you get to keep that money to invest until you retire. In addition to that, there are so many people who leave the free money on the table. A lot of employers who have an employer-sponsored 401k program, they give you a dollar for dollar match up to a certain percentage. So some employers will say, hey, I'll cut you off at $5,000 or $2,500 or 5% of your income. Or
that's very common.
There's all different ways that they help compensate you additional money. But imagine an employer saying, if you just do this, I'll give you more free money. And 80% of the country is probably like, no, I'm good. They're leaving some money on the table because they're not investing in their 401k enough to take advantage of all the free money that the company gives them in their employer-sponsored 401k program. And so that's kind of what we're talking about next. After you get your rainy day savings set up, you have your money market fund, you have that money that you can grab if you need it done. Now you're moving on to the next step. Okay, I've done that. Now I need to start preparing for retirement. Their question that you just put up is perfect, because if we have 8 years left and we need to maximize the amount of cash that I'm going to have in 8 years, I don't want to pay the Fed. I want to pay myself first. I want to keep as much of my check as humanly possible. I want to pad the 401k as much as I can and make sure that I'm taking advantage of as much of the free money that the company may be giving me, not every the match. And you want to take advantage of as much of the tax shelter for the next 8 years as humanly possible.
Yeah, I'll give you the dirty little secret, Isaiah, is the way the government the way the government sets the rules is that corporations can't pay people just little bits of money and pay the big shooters big bucks and have them put it into retirement. There's a ratio of how much money they have to have, and that's why they put in matching in a lot of these plans. That for the executives to be able to put in money, they got to have the majority of the people at the base putting in money. And I mean, some of these plans match dollar for dollar up to 10% of your pay. So if I told you I was going to give you a 10% raise, you had a simple answer, yes or no. What are you going to say?
I'm going to say yes, automatically.
I'm already working for this money. So if I can have 10% more, and it's simply by putting money in the 401k, and that 10% your employer puts in is not taxed, which is awesome to be able to get, extra money through, if there is such a thing as extra money throughout the year. And now they can restrict that match a little bit. So they're going to say, you got to work for me for a year or 3 years or 5 years. There's different. So it might be 5 years where you get 20% of it this year, 40% of it. And with all the turnover in employment, it's a way for employers that are good employers to keep employees. If I tell you I'm going to keep giving you money and you're going to get more and more every year, and you put money in year 2 and 3 and 4, and then by the time you get to the end of year 3 or 5, it's 100% yours. I mean, you talk about compounding money and it's free. So the big question is, that would be if they have an employer sponsored plan, do that. And the other thing I love about it, the expenses in those plans are low. You're going to find lower expenses on any of the underlying investments. Again, that's more for down the road. But you might pay like 4 cents per $100 of investment and fees. That's it. Okay. Based on the plan they have. And most of them have a variety of different places to invest. So you can get what you really want in a mix. And hopefully I get invited back and we can talk about that more, where to invest your money specifically. 8 years from retirement, that's still a long time. And it's not like you need all the money the first year of retirement. If you're going to retire, let's say 65, you've got to spread that money out over the next 20 years, which means you can still take some risk with that money. The other thing is the government's required that companies make their plans understandable to employees. And we worked with, a matter of fact, here in Detroit, Ford Motor Company years ago. And at one time they had 63 options where people could invest the money. And we were like, that's great, it's awesome. What we found out? It was too complicated. People were like, that's too much. You bury your head in the sand. I don't know what to do now. That you need maybe 5, 6, and a lot of plans now have to make it simple for people who don't know about investing. Yeah. And I said, if you keep it simple, it's great. They're called lifestyle funds. Yeah. You pick the year that you're going to retire, and they will invest the money accordingly.
Say that again.
They're called lifestyle funds, and typically what they'll say is they'll give a date like 2045 or 2050 or 2055. It's when you expect to retire, and they will take more risk when you're younger and less risk as you get near retirement or you get older. So they do all the math for you behind the scenes if you don't want to do it. So I like them and dislike them. I like them because they're very easy for people to use. They serve a great purpose. I dislike them because I think you can do better by learning a little bit and making some choices and moving money around a little bit, where those tend to be static. They just stick to their percentages no matter whether the market goes up or down. And I think if you do just a little bit of work on the market, if it goes up, you trim it off a little bit. If it goes down, you buy a little bit more. It's called rebalancing. By doing that, you can end up lowering your risk and making better returns. So we can talk about that more down the road. The other thing is, I don't know if I believe it was a lady who sent that in. If she doesn't have an employer, then something called an IRA, individual retirement account, would be great. And whether you put money in, then it's whether you go traditional or Roth. The same is true with the 401k. You have those options, but with an IRA, you can go traditional, which means you can write it off if you don't make too much money and you're not covered by an employer plan. Or you can do Roth, which you pay the taxes now, but the money, if you leave it in long enough, past 59 and a half and at least 5 years, grows totally tax-free And what I love about those, Isaiah and Chris, is you never pay tax on the money. So, I'm trying to convert a lot of my money and get it in Roth IRAs. An IRA you have to start touching when you're 72. Roth IRA you don't, and the Roth IRA is tax-free for my lifetime. So it's something that I'll probably end up leaving to my grandkids because it's the last thing I'm going to touch. It's totally tax-free. So if you have all these different piles of money, taxable, tax-deferred, tax-free, where would you like most of your money? I think most of us would agree. I want my money to be tax-free. Go ahead.
No, I was just saying 100%, definitely. But when it comes to like retirement and things like that, like what are the biggest risks for somebody that's thinking about like putting their money into like a Roth IRA or a traditional?
Well, you have the risks of, what's going to happen in the economy. I can tell you that, you go back 3 years ago, the stock market went crazy. They had a phenomenal year, and the year, it was up 30%. The year after that, it was down 22. So, I will tell you that the stock market over long periods of time will make you the most. It's also the most risky. So a lot of people want to stay away from it. They're worried about, losing their money. But if you put your money in just a savings account, you have risk too. So if I put my money in a savings account and I'm getting 0.25% in inflation, I'm going backwards. Or even if you're in a money market fund and you're earning 5 and you're in a higher tax bracket and you're giving a third back to the government, you're netting 3.7 if inflation's 4. So there's a risk in any investment, and that's inflation with what we have. And there's the underlying risk of investing with the government. I'll give you the best example. And I talked about treasury bills. That's lending the government money for a year. I'm not worried about our government going, although they fight over this budget crap all the time. I'm not worried about them going out of business in a year. There's something called treasury bonds that go 10 years to 30 years. Well, are you more worried about the government over 30 years? Yeah, I am. A lot more can go wrong in 30 years than 1 year. So the longer you commit to lending money, the more risk you take. And those are what I'm going to refer to as you go past money. Money are typically 1 year or less. I'll give everybody if you don't mind, a little tangent. Money, income, equity. Those are the 3 broad categories of money or of investments. And people talk, if I talk about cars and trucks, basically 2 forms of transportation. We could say SUVs and create a third category. They put a lot of different names on them, don't they? Yeah. Right? You can have a Taurus or a Sable or a Escalade or a Sierra. I mean, they put all different names on them, but it's basically a car or a truck or an SUV, right? The same is true with investing. Keep it simple. There's income investments. There's equity investments. The stock market is equity. It represents ownership. So when you have ownership in equities, if they go down, you lose money. You'll hear people say on paper, "Oh, it's not necessarily true." It is and it isn't, but you can lose. There's a greater risk there because the market could go down. You don't have that risk with money investments. Income investments, so it's money, safe, short-term liquid. The income investments are longer-term loans. So the government, where I talked about treasury bonds or notes going on, there's bills less than a year. There's notes, which are 1 year up to 10 years. And then there's bonds, which are 10 years to 30 years. Bonds are risky. Corporations do the same thing when you're lending money to a corporation. Some corporations borrow money all the time, like companies like Verizon and AT&T. They're borrowing money all the time, and they're willing to pay a competitive rate, and they're pretty stable. There's other companies that borrow money, and they're riskier. So you hear people talk about junk bonds or lowly rated bonds. So you have to look at the risk of the underlying company. The government's safer than AT&T or Verizon. There's then a startup company that's doing venture capital. So go ahead.
No, I was just saying it makes sense. But like
income investment.
When people are going into this method of investing and doing it because now they're retired, they want to spend time with their grandkids. They want to hang out. They want to enjoy life, Would you prefer a managed account or a self-managed account?
They want to get assets under management. I will, for what it's worth, there's some really good places to invest money and people who are willing to help you. And the fees are not ridiculous. So there's companies like Charles Schwab. You see their ads all the time on TV. Fidelity. See their ads on TV all the time. Vanguard. Those were probably 3 of my favorites because they're very low in terms of fees and expenses. And their help and their assistance when you call for help, like setting up an IRA that we talked about, if somebody wants to do that, or whether you should go Roth or traditional, the people there are so helpful. So, the self-directed, I'm going to give it, a hair, just a hair better, to do the self-directed if you have the knowledge. And if you don't, the managed accounts, I think are just fine. Like I mentioned, the 401k for people who don't want to worry about it or have a skill set, you go into one of those lifestyle, and the company who's doing your 401k, well, they'll manage it for you.
Right.
And the expenses are extremely reasonable. So that was a great question. I mean, that's for most people, if you don't want to be bothered. I mean, I had people who knew more than me, Isaiah, and I'd say, you can do this. I go, yeah, I could, but I don't want to.
Right.
I got stuff I want to go do. And I've gotten to the point now where I've build a model in retirement. And let's go back to that money, income, equity. Equity is going to return the most. And let's talk about a home ownership. Look what's happened to people who own homes over the last 3 years. I mean, the equity they've established just by the price of homes going up is probably equivalent to the market. So equity is ownership. That includes owning a home. Are there risks to owning a home? Yeah, there's some risk. Some of them you can insure. You guys talked about, not just homeowners insurance, but getting a plan that covers all your appliances, right? What did you guys call it?
Home warranty.
A home warranty or something, right?
Warranty,
stuff like that. But there's the risk that my house can go down in value. That all of a sudden they put an expressway, real nearby. They buy the neighbor's house up because that was right on the expressway, the easement, but mine's still standing right next to it. I had this, home that was in a quiet neighborhood, and all of a sudden now I got cars zooming by. So, property values can fluctuate a little bit, but houses are, other than the turmoil of the 2007, 8, 9, houses have been pretty steady as an investment historically and pretty safe. So, but that's, again, it's a form of equity. I've got equity in my house. So if you look at it, equity is going to have the highest return. You want to put all your money there? I can't. I'm retired. If I put it all there and the market goes down, what do? I don't do anything for a year. I lock myself in a closet in the dark like a mushroom. I mean, you got to live. You got to eat. So you can't have it all in the stock market. That does the best. Well, do I want to put it all safe? No, I don't want to put it all safe. It doesn't pay enough. So what we realized as young people, and our parents told us, don't put all your eggs in one basket. You want to diversify between money, income, equity. And this is I said, keep it simple. Over 90% of investment returns are based on how you allocate your money between those assets, between stocks, income, or I should say equity, income, and money market investments. And that's what determines your returns. So obviously, if I have more in stocks when I'm younger, people like you and Chris should be heavily stocks, right, in your 401k or your investment. Because you're still earning money, you don't need it today. You can take more risk. When you get to retirement, you taper that off. There was an old rule of thumb. I'm not a big fan. It used to be you should have the amount in equity was 100 minus your age. And well, is a rule of thumb. If you got a newborn, put it all in the stock market. It's 18 years before they go to college, or 67 years before they retire. So put it in equity where it's going to make the most. There'll be a lot of ups and downs on the way, but over the long haul, they'll be fine. So the time horizon is relevant. I think it's more, you guys name your thing cash flow, which I love, because it's more cash flow. If I have enough money coming in where I can allocate more towards stocks. So I know I've got enough money in safe, short-term liquid investments at the bank, and my wife's very conservative. So her money is more in the money and income type investments. Right. I'm more of a risk taker. So we blend it between people, or you can blend it in your account. That's what generates the returns. So I know I can still take risk and have money in the market because I don't need it next year. I might not need it for 4 or 5 years. And by then, even after 2008 and 9, when the market tanked, 4 years, it still recovered. Right. In 1987, the market went down 25% in a day, and by the end of the year, it was still positive for that year. So it tends to recover, and I will tell people it has always recovered historically. I can't guarantee that in the future, but even after it went down 20-some% last year, or the year before, returns last year, this year so far, returns are phenomenal. Yeah. So blend it. That's the key. Don't put it all in one basket. Diversify your assets.
Can you blow that up, Isaiah? Oh, you got it there. Those are the things we talked about. And when Brian talks about investing money in stocks and being in that category pretty heavily, it doesn't mean go buy, you can do that and that's fine. But there are safer, better ways to do it. A lot of these 401k plans can help you figure out the proper mix. So if you're trying to invest and you want your money in stocks, typically what you're going to do, and this, Brian and I talked about this a long time ago, and we created a model for me too, and I self-manage everything of mine, because you can use what's called a market index fund. You can take your money and play the entire market. So this is an example that Isaiah has up right now of the S&P 500. It's the top 500 companies in the country. If you're going to bet on something, this historically is your best model to bet a lot of money into. It is. Because it's the top 500 companies in the country, as long as nothing crazy happens, are probably going to do pretty well. And so I use this as an example. When you go in and you start buying, we talked about being in the market as early as humanly possible. It's never too late, but you want to start today, not tomorrow. And you want to be consistent with your habits. So the reason I have this up, and I don't know if we can blow this up anymore or if this is kind of where we're at, but if you get granular and you look down at the green line, that is the history of the S&P 500. I put a bunch of dots along the green mountains that you see there, which is the S&P. If every time you bought from the 80s, the S&P 500, you would have bought when it was low and when it was high. But if you look back in the 80s and 90s, what looked to be a high market where people might say, oh, the market's up, I don't want to buy right now, it's too high. When you're investing over a long period of time, 20, 30, 40 years, what's high today is not going to be high in 20 years. The earth-shattering moment that Brian talked about in 87, where it was like, oh my God, the market dropped 25%.
Sky's falling.
Smart people took money out of their bank and put it into the market, at least some of it. They got in to some extent when they saw the market go down, because the people who built a lot of wealth on tragedy are the people who saw these dips in the market and realized, yes, I can't take all my rainy day savings and get rid of all my security, but I could risk $5,000 and I'll be okay. Let me get into the market now, because they know if you look at the history of investing, when you're betting on your retirement being way down the road, now for the person we talked to earlier that's retiring in 8 years, you have to be a little bit more calculated. But for a lot of the audience that we might be talking to that's in their 20s or 30s or maybe even 40, if you're not touching this money for 20 years, invest every month, invest regularly. And if you're not a market guru, don't look at the market and say, oh, it's too, just put it in there. Stop looking at it. Keep going forward. 20 years from now, you'll thank yourself. Don't think about it too much.
Keep it simple.
Just do it. And what this blue line represents is the average price. If you bought everywhere on that green line, if you go all the way to the end of that blue arrow, your average price that you paid for that was probably around $2,500. And when you sell it, you've more than doubled your money.
Yeah, we talked about keeping it simple, Isaiah, and that's really when you're putting money in your 401k and they deduct it each week, or you're buying sometimes when it's down, that's called dollar cost averaging, which is a very effective way to get money into the market. And it does reduce the risk, to some degree. Chris mentioned the S&P 500, and I want people to think about that. What companies started large? None of them did, right? Apple wasn't. Google, Microsoft, NVIDIA, ExxonMobil, none of them started big. They all got bigger over time. So by investing in the S&P 500, it invests more in companies that are growing. And if a company falls out of the 500, the top 500, it pushes it out of that index. So it's like a self-weeding garden. Good companies are allowed to grow and poor companies are trimmed back. So it's a decent place. And I think probably everybody who I've ever talked to should have money in the S&P 500 index. 500 largest companies in America. And people say, well, can I lose all my money? And my answer, you got to be honest, is yes. But that means the 500 largest companies in America are all out of business. I got news for you. Losing your money in the stock market is not going to be your biggest problem. There's no grocery stores, there's no banks, there's nobody making anything. I mean, if the 500 largest companies go out of business, we're all in trouble. And Chris's point led me back to something you asked. Are you better off doing self-managed or having somebody do it? Well, if you're self-managing, like a couple of years ago when COVID hit, Isaiah, the market went way down. I followed that allocation where I said I had my money in stock. I took my other money, and bought more stocks to get it up to that 10%. And now that the market's recovered, that money's made way too much money. I can't say way too much, but the returns are phenomenal. So I like, having somebody manage it, but self-directing it, you can make little moves that they may or may not make for you. and that is called rebalancing. So if you do go and have somebody invest your money for you, then you want to ask, when do they rebalance or what triggers rebalancing so that they can take advantage of shifts in the market.
Okay.
And then if you got to keep whoever you're investing your money with, you got to hold their feet to the fire just a little bit. And you want to compare them, have some benchmark of what's your expected rate of return. I'd have people come in and say, I want to make 18% per year. I said, well, go to the guy down the street. I'm not promising you that. I can't deliver that. If you want to talk about a reasonable rate of return or how much risk are you willing to take? I had a young couple and they were making silly money. And they said they were going to invest $500,000. And they said, we can take risk. We'll go for anything. I go, so if the account's down 20%, is that going to bother you? And they said, no. I said, okay. So when you're down $100,000, and they went, what? I said, well, that's 20% on 500,000, 100 grand. They go, we can't afford to lose that kind of money. It's too hard to save it. I said, yeah, okay. So you can't take that much risk. So that will help an advisor is, I'd be on a tropical island somewhere in my ties. So, and I'll tell people, I say, keep it simple again. There's a lot of smart people out there, way smarter than any of us. And there's computers out there that are way powerful than anything we ever dreamed of. And there's more data out there than you can possibly imagine. With all this brain power, all these computers and all this data, nobody's been able to figure it out yet. What makes you think you can? So rather than trying to, be the guru or follow someone who thinks they're a guru or pay a lot of money for a newsletter, just keep it simple, do the right things, start saving money. The more you save, it gets contagious. You'll start saving more. Then the problem is you get like me when you get older and you got money, you don't want to touch it. It's like your little baby. You watch it grow and it's just like, I don't want to touch it. It's doing great. Don't touch it. That's what you saved it for. So we can show another one down the road of that $1 million. To me, it's great. You got the $1 million. But what will it provide? How much could you take out every year in retirement? Give yourself a 5% raise every year and probably leave your kids that $1 million. If you took a 50 grand out every year, gave yourself a 5% raise, you probably end up leaving your kids $500,000, $800,000 down the road. So the worst case scenario is, you leave somebody wealthy. And if you don't have any beneficiaries, I'll have Isaiah get you my address, phone number, everything you need. I'll be your beneficiary. If you're worried about who you want to leave, you guys can get in on that too if you want. So,
yeah. Well, I think the other
just kind of wrap up this call and because I feel like that was a good happy hour. It's very informative.
I'll drink to that.
Yeah,
I'll drink to that.
I listen. Mine is already finished. I'm kind of getting woozy out over here.
That's why you're wrapping up. You're all done now.
Yeah. So I really feel like that was a very good segue into it. Say that again. Sorry, Brian.
Next time we'll work on getting the second, third, and hitting the home runs. So this was just get to first base. Just get started saving. I don't care how old you are. It's never too late to save money.
We can talk about asset allocation in the form that Brian kind of taught me. Really easy format, really easy way to help people pick index funds and kind of build their own managed portfolio. It's very easy. So, if you watch this, you're kind of interested in learning the 2.0 stuff. That's what comes next. And once you have that key piece of information that we're going to talk about maybe on the next time, now you're armed with the tool that you need to not only build your own portfolio, but now you can manage and rebalance as needed. And it's very, very simple. So we'll get into that. That'll be a little teaser for next time.
And if anybody gets rid of their Netflix, Isaiah, to save money, guess what? They'll give it back to you if you want to sign up again. It's not a permanent decision. They'll always take your money.
I get rid of the NFL app after every season. I'm like, NFL app, delete it.
Yep.
Small good choice. Small good choice.
And with my team is usually over by playoffs. It's usually over the first round. So I usually cut it off the first round.
Oh, Steelers?
No, I'm a Cowboys fan.
Cowboys.
So mine's is early.
Cowboys, Cowboys.
Yeah, mine's is early. They kick me early. I'm like, boom, it's over. I'm done watching it.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for the opportunity to talk with you guys.
Yeah, thanks everybody. Thanks for tuning in. And if you do not already, please like, subscribe, and share. And thanks for watching. I really appreciate you. As all my guests and all my viewers, I really appreciate you actually tuning in and like, subscribe, and share, like I said before. And thanks again. So we're out. And if you have any more ideas or anything that you want to add to it or anything that you want us to talk about, please put it in the comments, put it under our videos. We are going to give out snippets of this video and things like that. So be aware of watching it on TikTok, watching it on YouTube. We're going to cut this video down. So any of y'all that did not watch it, you're going to have a little other snippets of this video that you can watch and like and share for later dates. So thanks for watching. Thanks for tuning in. We're out.